Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another episode of the Print Business Clinic, brought to you by us here at the Vinyl Guys. I'm Carl. I'm an engineer, a tech over in the UK, fixing a whole range of the Roland products, from printers, cutters, lasers, milling machines. And now YouTube tutorials, free training sessions. So today we're going to be looking at the colour management side of things in relation to your Roland printer. Doing these free sessions, our aim is always to try and provide as much information as possible, but keeping the information relevant and useful. So I'd like to introduce, our first guest we've ever had on the channel. Colour expert and all-round printer expert, if you don't mind me saying, Phil Keenan. He's going to be dipping in and sort of giving his knowledge on the colour side. My colour knowledge isn't entirely, I wouldn't say I was an expert, so hopefully we all learn something new today. So welcome to the channel, Phil. I don't know if you just want to, for people who don't know you, I don't know if you just want to introduce yourself and what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. Thanks, Carl. As Carl says, colour is a big part of my world on a daily basis. I do also do servicing and troubleshooting with printers. I am a authorised Roland service agent. I do work on just about any brand for my customers, though. I've been in the printing game ever since I left high school. In signage before then, with my eldest brother-in-law getting me to work on school holidays, etc. So I've been in the game a long time. About 20 years ago, I started working in the technical sense for a supplier and training other people how to get the most out of the machines and really getting into colour and making the most out of every drop. So now I split my time between my colour business and the service agency. Most of what I like to do with colour is actually more about workflow, getting the machines printing right. And the colour profiling side of it is just really the measurement and making sure that what we get out is right, is accurate and repeatable. So that's really what I'm doing every week.
Great stuff, thanks, Phil. And like I said, like you just said, the colour management side, you can go so deep into it with the profiles. After our chat last week, I just thought, who better to get than to, when you're trying to choose what colour you want to print, how you want to print it, who better to get than yourself? And I just thought, after our conversation last week, I thought this would be a great idea to get you on and have a chat and point us through a few things. So, like I said, I'm sure we'll all learn something new today on the colour side. So what we're going to do first is we're going to have a look in Illustrator and VersaWorks. So what Roland have done to make sort of colour matching easier for the user on a basic level is they've created a colour selector, which is available in VersaWorks. And then you can have a replica of that in your artwork in a colour palette, which is called the Roland Colour System Library. As the newer models have come out into the market, such as the VG2, the VG3, or the TrueViz range, you now have orange and greens. With the RF8 colour, you have the red. So what they provide you with now is the orange and green colour system library, which you'll see in a second. For all these videos we're going to be doing, it will be through Illustrator. With the colour palettes, it will be exactly the same through CorelDRAW. As long as you don't have the student version or X7, as long as you've got X7 and above, all the Roland colour palettes will be available within CorelDRAW. So once you have them colour palettes imported into your software, the process is still exactly the same. So I'm just going to share my screen so you can see what's going on. So we've got the Illustrator software open. You should be able to see that. Can you see that, Phil?
Yes, Carl, thank you.
Cool. So what we're going to do is bring in that colour swatch. So we'll go to Window, scroll down to, and as long as you've got VersaWorks installed on your PC, this is the way you could import this colour palette. So you go to Other Library, and you're going into your C drive just to bring that in. So you'll see you should have a VersaWorks folder. In there, you've got your colour swatches, and you've got a CorelDRAW and Illustrator. Like I say, all the colour swatches in CorelDRAW are built in as long as you have X7 and above. If you've got anything previous, they're the swatches you'll need to bring in. So in Illustrator, you'll open that folder. And like I was just saying, you'll have a whole host of colour system libraries. The main ones we use is Roland VersaWorks. So in that one, you'll have your cut contour, your RDG white, your gloss, your primer, and so on. And then the main one is the colour system library. So this applies to the sort of the whole CMYK range. You will have a green and the orange colour system library for your VG2s and VG3s if you have that colour configuration on your printer. So for now, we're just going to open the colour system library, and that will open a separate palette on your Illustrator page. We won't go into too much detail on the design. I'm just going to give you a quick brief of how to locate a certain colour. So as you hover over a colour, they'll have an RVW code, which is a VersaWorks code. What you'll see in a second in VersaWorks is there's a printable colour selector, which you can print out on your machine, and it'll print out all them colours on your printer with the code underneath. So your computer screen, if you're not lucky enough to have it colour calibrated, it will always look different on your screen to what it does when it prints out, depending on your ink configuration. So a basic way of Roland provide is a colour selector. So you can print this out onto your printer, so you get a visual of how your printer is printing that colour. So even though it looks different on screen, you know how your printer is going to print. Now, the whole point of this colour, the colour management, is you need to get the profile right and the colour management right before you even think about printing it. There's no point printing that out if you're not sure on the colour management side of things. So we'll jump into VersaWorks now, and I'll show you the colour selector, and we'll go into a bit more detail of how to do the profiling, how to do the colour management, and hopefully Phil can add his expertise on that and correct me where I might stumble. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So into VersaWorks, select whatever job you want to do. For this instance, I've just got the most colourful job I could find. And as you go into it, then you've got all your normal job settings. Like I was just saying, if you want to find the colour selector, so the printable option that you have for your colour swatches, if you go to media along the top, you'll have the colour selector. You'll also have the colour selector for the orange and the green, as previously advised. So for now, we'll get the colour selector in, and what it will do, it will print out 22 A4 pages of all them colours you've just seen in that colour system library swatch within Illustrator.
Can I interrupt you for a second there, Carl? It doesn't look like on my screen. I can't see your VersaWorks.
Right, okay. 2 seconds, mate. Let me just... There we go. That's it. So you should be able to see it now. Can you see it?
Yep, that's it.
Cool. Sorry, mate, I forgot to flip screens. So what you can see in VersaWorks now is, like I've just said, sorry about that, you get to media along the top. You'll have the colour selector, the orange colour selector, and the green colour selector. So the one we've brought in through Illustrator is the colour selector. So what it will do, it will print out the 22 A4 pages of all them colours you've seen in that colour swatch. So we've clicked it and it brings it in, and now you've got it in your job queue. So at this point, once you know what media you want to print on, essentially you can just press print and go. But the main thing is getting your colour settings right. So if you are colour matching to that colour selector, that colour is going to come out the way you want it, which is where the profiling comes in and the colour management. So once you go into the colour selector, depending on what printer you have, you'll have your quality. So you see all the colours on the right hand side. Depending on what quality and the media type, you have to set the queue up to print this job, which is why you have to get your colour and your profiler sorted before we move on. So we'll just go into the QA settings and we'll go into the quality. So depending on what printer you've got, you'll have different media types. So the BN20, you'll have slightly different to the VG3. The old SPs and the VSs, you might have slightly different generic media types to what the VG3 has. In this instance, this is the VG3, so we're just going to go off this basis and go from there. So at this point, all you'll have in your VersaWorks is your generic vinyls. Depending on where you get your media from, certain manufacturers will have an RCC profile site, so you can go direct to the manufacturer and download the correct profile for your media. At the bottom, you've got the colour management. Again, everybody's view on colour can be completely different. Some people might see a red as a maroon, some people might see a dark navy blue as a purple. This is why the colour selector and getting your profile and your colour management right it's essential, really, depending on what the customer wants and what you're seeing on your design, on your print. So the true rich colours, correct me if I'm wrong here, Phil, they relate to the TR ink, which is on the...
That's correct.
Yeah. Thanks, Phil. So you'll have True Rich Colour 2, True Rich Colour 3.
So 3, yeah. 2 and 3 have the same CMYK profile. They both take in the orange and green.
Okay.
True Rich Colour does not take the green in. But they have the RGB profile for True Rich Colour 3 is a wider gamut again. So it's the widest RGB gamut they have.
Okay.
And like you say, they're designed to exploit the benefits of the TR ink sets.
Right. Okay. I mean, that's a really good point, because when I've used the True Rich colours, I've found the yellows slightly grainy, a little bit darker than normal. I mean, I don't know if you can touch on any of the other colour managements and what you'd recommend or how you'd go about.
Well, yeah. So my go-to for most of my customers, who are typically high-end customers who really care about their color output and consistency, I'll typically use on this software Prepress Europe as my go-to. And the main reason there is that the European CMYK standard that's used in that preset is very close to the FOGRA standards, the ISOs, that they all sort of very close to each other. So they've got good density without having crazy color. And I'm sure you've seen it. If you go between Prepress General US and into a True Rich Color, you'll notice how different it can look.
Yeah.
The Prepress Europe allows you to get better reds, a little bit more density in each of the channels. So your CMYK has just got a little bit more oomph without being crazy and unpredictable. Because if you've got orange ink and you use True Rich Color 3 and you've designed something to match an offset press that doesn't have orange ink, True Rich Color 3 is going to make it really pop and look significantly different. So my go-to, like I say, is Prepress Europe for that reason. It's fairly standard and safe, but it also has a setting inside there which it honors any embedded profile. So if someone's providing a file that has an embedded color profile, it will ignore whatever the presets are there and just take on what the file has in it. So if the designer has an intention for that, or a photographer, for example, has embedded a photo, a profile from their camera, it'll actually pick that up and use that for that element of the file. VersaWorks is actually really advanced when it comes to that side of the color management. I've got my test files have 6 different embedded profiles, and VersaWorks honors every single one of them. So it's got some really good power there, but for basic users or people who just don't want to go too crazy deep into it, they've got those options just to stick with the basics, sort of like the prepress US or Europe, or if they really want to push the gamut, they can certainly use one of the True Rich Color. They just won't get that consistency across different brands or whatever if they're going that way. Any of those wide gamut profiles will just really, really push the color right out. But you know, the guys who are doing vehicle wrapping, that maybe that's what they want.
Right, that's so with the, say if I downloaded a certain manufacturer's OCC profile and it brought it into VersaWorks, would the color management in VersaWorks change the design then? Would it interrupt the profile that you've downloaded, or does that not make a difference?
Well, it makes a difference to the output, but what you're looking at here is presets for the input profiles. So with the color management, we have a desired target, which is your input profiles or how the intent of the design, or what they call a working space. And you'll notice in Illustrator that they'll have those in the background there in your color management settings in your design software. You have that, so that's your input. And then of course you've got your media profiles, which is the output profile. That's the capabilities of that machine and ink and print mode on that media. So what we're doing here is we're saying, well, can you print True Rich Color 3? I don't actually have orange ink. Let's just say I've only got an SG machine with CMYK. I can still choose True Rich Color 3, but the software is going to go, well, I can't, the output profile doesn't let me hit every single one of those colors. I'll do the best I can. And without getting too deep into it, that's what rendering intents do. Is rendering intent lets you choose how do I handle those out of gamut colors. But I think that's for another day. You know, ultimately, these are presets for input or target. What do we want it to look like? And the media profile is how's the machine going to be able to do it? You know, can they even get it on that media?
Right. Okay. I think this is like I say, these are really. This is the sort of information that I've never been told. So I think this input is. I think it's what people definitely need to know. Again, when
that's your target.
When we say about different opinions on colour, I've always been told to use sign of display, pre-press Europe for sort of skin tones and stuff like that. So it does show that everyone sort of has a different view, different opinion on colour. But yes, it's good to get a good understanding of the True Rich colours, because I've never really either looked into it or been sort of shown what the difference of each one is. So,
well, I have, you know, people know me as a bit of a machine and color nerd. So I have actually gone in and looked at the 3D models of each of those color spaces and how they map across to a profile, and how my output profiles can possibly produce some of that. So, you know, we can go really deep into it, but at the end of the day, if you choose True Rich Color 3, you're shooting for the biggest possible color. That's the simple way to put it. If you're looking for consistent color between brands of machine or different, like, you know, a CMYK SG and a VG, and you need to get consistent color across all your machines, then you'd be looking for one of those other standards. And even other brands will have those similar standards. So if the output profile is accurate, you should be able to pretty much hit every color exactly the same. Even if you've got a UV machine, solvent machine, a resin machine, you know, if they're all in the gamut of each of the machines, you should be able to hit it. And that's why the output profile you were saying before, that's why it's so important, because if it's not accurate, it doesn't matter what you do with the input, the output won't be right.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. So as we look down on the color management, like Phil says, you've got your True Rich colors, you got your pre-press general, pre-press US, pre-press Europe, and so on. The way I've been told in the past at a very basic level is each color management will print out at a different sort of percentage, so you will get a different shade of certain colors on different color management settings. In VersaWorks 6, they have brought out a generate job variation, which for a basic user can be ideal. So select your job. If you go to job at the top, you've got your generate variation job, and from here you can print this job out at certain quality settings, color management settings, which will print out onto your printer, and you can visually look at which color you think is best, and you can use it as a start point for your color management settings. So for instance, if I'm printing this lion job, if I go to compare quality settings, go to next, I can print that out at whatever profile I want to print. So again, you've got your generic ones. You've also got your, if you download the RCC profiles from certain manufacturers, they'll also show in there, and you can print that job out on certain profiles that in that sense. With the color management, it's exactly the same process. You got your True Rich colors, pre-press general, pre-press Europe, and max impact, and so on. So whichever one you think could work for you, you select that and you print that job out at them settings. So again, as far as VersaWorks goes, it gives the user the option to print either the whole job or parts of the job at certain quality settings, so you know which color will suit you best, which color will suit your customer as well. So
those tools, Carl, are really, really valuable, because like you say, most users aren't necessarily up to speed with what all those mean. Well, they actually can just test that right there. And a lot of people think it must be on the payroll for VersaWorks, because I do sing its praises, and that's a really great thing, right? It's it's those top two options. The third one, not so much. I'm not a big fan of changing color curves. If you've got the right output profile, you should never need to touch that. But those other things, because sometimes you're not sure. Maybe the designer often doesn't even know how to embed profiles. So you've got to maybe test and see, will it look better here? Will it look better there? And, fantastic tool. It's certainly undersold.
I think you probably know from the days of VersaWorks 5, the way VersaWorks 6 has sort of caught up with the color matching, with the nozzle masking, with that generate variation job. It's giving, for a free software, it's giving the user a lot more options to get the color right, to get the job right, to get the print right, rather than going too much into too much detail. It gives the user a start point, and then if they need more profile and color matching in the future, they can then go on to your bigger softwares and your profiling tools. So I definitely think VersaWorks 6 is, for a free software, is fantastic. So to go back onto the color selector, like you say, once you've got your color management and your profile sorted, we know what you want to print on, what color management. You can then print out this chart, and again, this chart will print out the color exactly how the machine sees it. Your screen might see it slightly different. What I always sort of advise customers is, once you're happy with your settings, once you're happy with your color management, you can print that out, chop it up, put it in a book, put it in your drawer in your desk. Some people put it up on a wall. What I would warn against with that is natural light, UV light can fade the colors over time. So you could lose the actual true color of that swatch. So chop it up, put it in a book, put it in your desk. When a customer comes in, they can decide what color they want to use, and you can then match that to the code on Illustrator.
Yeah, and one point I would like to make here is, it's a good time to laminate that as well with the standard laminate, so that what you're looking at is the exact finished product.
That's a very good point. Like I said, if you're doing a lot of outdoor signage, a lot of vehicle graphics, a lot of outdoor stickers, laminating over the top, like Phil says, will give you that end look of the product. So it's definitely worth, however you're going to finish that design, most of your designs, laminate it, put it in a book, and use it as a reference point when needed. As far as the quality goes, have you got any sort of hints and tips on passes? Is there any need to have the higher passes? I know it's all about quality. would you say, Phil, that there's a recommended sort of pass mode that will get you by day? Is there any benefit in using a high quality to a high speed other than the quality, or is there much difference? Have you got any hints and tips on that side of things?
Well, first of all, the terms high quality, standard, and high speed are an arbitrary name that someone's come up with. They don't always really relate to your point of view. You might find that the high speed is good enough quality. You might say, I'll run it as my standard print. So, it is just to sort of give you a rough idea that from the top to bottom, and you can see in the speed difference that, hey, I'm going to go slower. I should end up with a sharper print. When it comes down to, say, these models of machines, so if you're running an 8-channel or not a force, just a CMYK, if you're running a multi-channel VG3, the 12 pass gives us a superior print to the 10 pass. It will hide some sins, so as the heads are aging, the 12 will make it look smoother, a lot smoother. And you only sacrifice, well, let's call it 20% of your print speed. So the other bonus with that is by printing it slightly slower, the material sits over the heater slightly longer, which means it actually outgasses a fraction more. So you can expedite your laminating as well by going that touch slower. Standard setting, or the 900 by 600 at 12 pass is my go-to, my starting point for my customers for general signage. I rarely do profiles at high quality. That's usually only for customers who need that step up. And usually often it's actually just a backup in case nozzles get that bad. They need something to go a bit slower just to get them by until a tech can come out. For the most part, that 12 pass is the winner. That is available in just about all the base profiles.
So I think with going back to the name of the print qualities, I always find for the BN20 especially, they're not very well worded. So you've got the draft 2 and standard.
Yes.
When you look at the print resolutions, the standard is actually, it's up there with probably one of the highest quality machines that Roland do. I think it's a 1440 by 1080. But the way it's worded, the draft and the draft 2 always make it sound like it's not going to print as well as it does. So your draft 2 on your BN20, I find, is more or less your standard on your bigger machines. So I think on that side, I think the naming, especially on the BN20, can be a bit misdeceiving. So yeah, I definitely see.
This is why users should try that variation, or just even test it themselves. A small slither, they can use the clip and tile, crop a slice out that has a lot of the colors or the elements, and they can test it. And don't just take those things for granted. You may find that one of those other settings gives you an acceptable result at a good speed.
Definitely, like I say, I think that function they've added on VersaWorks, it's definitely fantastic for users to save wastage, save ink. If you're not 100% sure, like I say, you can chop a bit of your job up in the clip and tile, send a little bit of each quality, each color management, and see which one suits you. Like I say, in the past, you've had to print out a little bit of each job at a different color management. It does take time, but this way it will save you time, save your ink, save your wastage. There's definitely a good function to have. With the print qualities, us here at the Vinyl Guys, depending on, we use an LEC2, which is, it's non-stop, 8 hours, 9 hours a day, non-stop. It is UV, so with that you can get away with high speed at certain stickers. Block colors, we tend to do it standard. Because it's UV, it is sort of instant cure, so you have the VG freeze, and the solvent will differ from that. So that's just what we use. We do also use a VG2 and a VG3. And most of the time with what we do, stickers, van graphics, etc., standard or high speed is more than adequate to get by. I don't think I've ever used high quality for anything other than sort of high detailed photographs. So yeah, I wouldn't. Me personally, I don't use the high quality setting.
I think the important thing to note, or for people to understand, is that just because it's a higher resolution doesn't mean the quality of the print is better. In fact, a lot of my profiles are produced at a lower setting than the customer was previously using, but they're getting a better result. So the different resolutions use different dot sizes, and sometimes those smaller dot sizes don't place as well, depending on the media and other issues. So yeah, so just try it is what I say. Give it a go.
Definitely.
And if you're having trouble with some bits, go up a level.
Definitely. I mean, when we had that chat last week over the phone, you were telling me exactly that, and we took that into our own sort of routine. I didn't know that when you told me that. That was something new I'd learned that day. So again, there's always something new you can learn, and that sort of information can, it's really it's invaluable. So try and take any sort of information you can, any advice on that side of things into your day-to-day print, and it will pay off. Again, I don't know how much you want to go to detail with the half-tone interpolation. I don't normally touch too much on that. Again, could be a bit more in detail. I'll just say leave it. For DX7, I use error diffusion, and DX4 I use Diver. I don't know if that makes a point. It was just what I was taught from my early days getting into print.
Look, the error diffusion takes longer to rip, and it has a better use of the variable dots. So you generally, if you're having any coarseness in your print in Diver, flicking it to error diffusion will usually smooth that out. So it's one of the tools you can use to get around some issues in print. But the issues in print usually come from not using a well-formed profile, output profile. We're generally using a generic, and that's that on a certain media, and you may come across a problem. So you can use those halftones to work around those. The interpolation, leave well enough alone. It again will slow down the ripping if you go to anything else but nearest neighbor. It can help with images that are photographic or that have a slightly lower resolution. It will actually do, just like in Photoshop, if you ever see it has exactly the same settings, you can go to bicubic, and it will actually guess a step in between the pixels. So it means that instead of having a harder line between pixel color changes, it will just soften it a little tiny bit. It's not brilliant. It can't make something out of nothing, but it definitely makes images a little bit low res just look that little bit nicer. And then of course you've got your direction, which again, leave it with the profile. But if you're battling with bleeding or other issues because you're using a generic, again, you can always flick to uni, and that can help you diagnose some other issues too, like alignments or whatever. But ultimately those settings, for the most part, can just be left as they are in the profile.
Okay, great. So for those, I'm sorry, mate.
Sorry. So yeah. But what I meant to say was those values are actually set by the person who builds the profile in the first place.
Okay.
So the person who builds the profile chooses which halftone they're going to use. They choose the head speeds. They choose whether it's uni or bi. So those all get decided. And when I'm building profiles, I can say, hey, only use this, and don't give Carl an option, right?
It's probably
or I can say, hey, use this. Or I can say use error diffusion as your preference, but allow the customer to change it to Diver if they want to. I prefer to leave it if they can change it. I just set it to whichever one works best on that media at the time with the profile. And I will sometimes use a different Diver based on some challenges you have with ink wetting out or whatever. So again, whoever's building the profile should have already gone through and worked out what settings are best. You shouldn't need to play with them.
Okay. Well, I suppose if you're getting the correct profile and the color management, that shouldn't really apply.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I didn't want to go into too much detail with that, but I just thought if we could touch on it, just so then, the users can get an understanding of what it means and what it can do. But like I say, if you've got the correct profile anyway, then probably just leave well alone, which I tend to do. Is there anything else in the colour management or the profiling you want to touch on, Phil, or any hints and tips you can give on?
Yeah, just quickly, when you're talking about sign display before, it is really quite good for traffic signage or safety signs. Just signs that just need to get a message across really simply, where the colours aren't as critical. So, sign display has a setting in there. If you open it up, you click on it and then go to properties, I think it is.
Yeah.
You'll see there has a tick box for preserve primary colours.
Yeah.
What that means is that anything that's got 100% of the primary channels, so yellow, cyan, magenta, or K, anything that's got a percentage of those, or even values of more than one, it will actually ignore the color profiles and will just print just that channel. So you can get weird results. But for safety signs, you don't have gradients. You don't have anything that would be affected by that. But that's just something to be aware of. And you'll notice in here that, sorry, I'm not moving my mouse and nothing's happening. You'll notice in the simulation target profile, so those targets, right, that it's trying to choose, you've got Adobe 998, which is a nice broad gamut RGB target. And that's actually a nice one. It's quite common. It's pretty much an industry standard around the world in most industries. And it automatically chooses that. And the Japan standard is also a little bit like European standards, it's a little bit more dense. But again, similar ICC to your standard, to your US as well. So, but it ignores that with that preserved primary color. And that's the important thing people understand, is that a gradient might look weird because it goes from a mix of colors to one solid, and you can get a hard line where that transition is because it no longer is color managed. So great if you just want to throw some stuff out for safety signs, but be mindful that it's not necessarily the most accurate because of that.
Yeah, because like I say, whenever I was sort of being trained myself many years ago, I was told sign and display, like you say, just as a start point if you're just doing basic signage. Max impact. I was told that this will, on matte material, especially HTV or your matte vinyls, it will make certain colours stand out a little bit more. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Max Impact, like the True Rich range, Max Impact was developed, and I'm speaking a little bit out of turn here because I'm not close to the people who designed it, but from as far as I can tell, it came out with Ecosol Max, and it seems to have an input profile that targets the best of the Ecosol Max inks, a bit like the True Rich color range do. So it's a broader input profile. So before we had the TR inks, we only had Ecosol Max. So we had that. That was their equivalent in the day. So it will print cleaner colors in the channels, more bold. It'll be more intense. But it's again less accurate because it's using a input profile that, unless you have embedded it, and today's not the day to talk about that, but you can embed those very input profiles into your design software and actually design in that space, and then you don't have to worry about it being wrong. But sometimes for the basic users, they just want something to give it a bit more impact, and so that's what they can choose. If they want something with more impact and a little bit more oomph again on top of that, they just go True Rich color, because the True Rich color is that next level up. But Max Impact's been around for a long time, and that's really what people are using for most of that.
I'm glad we've got that side of it right then. Yeah, I've been telling a lot of HTV customers that they get sort of like reds and blues that come out slightly pinky, and they just want it just to pop a little bit more. So yeah, I always try and push them towards the Max Impact, but I've never really knew what was behind it in color wise.
Yeah, the most reason people do use that is because their output profile doesn't have it's not right. So if it's coming out a little bit weak, you can sort of offset that by using the wrong output profile anyway. So you could use the wrong input profile and compensate for that weakness in the color. It's a second best solution, but if they haven't got the resources or the time or the ability to get it profiled professionally, it's a nice way to work around some problems.
I suppose on a basic level, that works quite well though, doesn't it? So
Exactly.
Before we just go on to the last little bit, is there anything else you think could be helpful for users in any of these settings, or in the?
Well, actually, yes. I didn't actually think of it, but now you say it. Down in job management.
Yeah.
So there is some ability to automate. Now, obviously, in here, because you're in a job, some things are grayed out. But you don't need to go into the queue. Oh, okay. You can actually automate some processes. So if you have some media you use all the time and some basic jobs, and you just want to hit print and just have them go, or even just use the hot folder and drop things in, you can put things in the jobs in the input folder and have the software automatically rip and print for you. This is a really good tool for people who are doing a lot of repeat type work. So, small batches. And you can set it up that the software on that queue only will automatically take whatever's been dropped into that folder and rip it and print it immediately. I have a lot of customers who do like a high volume workflows, and they use these sorts of things in Onyx or Ergosoft or whatever they have. But some of my intermediate customers have VersaWorks, and we set that up as well. So that's a really handy thing. So under the action, you've got that's the action after printing. Sorry, the action for incoming jobs, you've got do nothing, rip only, or rip and print. The action for after is if you've got a high volume of work, of course you can have it delete the job if you just want it to come in and go out. There are kiosks set up that use Roland printers around the place, and those kiosks literally do that. The file comes in, it prints it, and it deletes it. So that's a really cool thing for that. Now, under that, there's an auto rotate. A lot of people get frustrated when they say, oh, I go and make one change to my layout and it rotates everything and puts it out of the way. If that bothers you, turn that off. It's that simple. If you uncheck that in your queue, any job you bring in after that point, it will not automatically rotate when you make a change. So when people are nesting jobs, they get frustrated because it re-rotates them. If you make a change in a size or a spacing, if you have that unchecked, all your pain goes away.
You know what? I've never ever knew that. This is why we got you on. I've never ever knew that was a thing. So
that's gold. That is gold. And honestly, I've been using VersaWorks ever since it came out. I think version 2 was the first one I had. And it's probably only the last few years where I've actually bothered to untick that and try it, because it was bothering me when I'm doing all my layouts for test files.
Yeah.
Because my test files used to be, 16 different files nested together before I got smart and made new files with them all embedded. But it used to re-rotate things and bother me, and I had enough of it. So I thought, I wonder if this will fix it. And quite frankly, it did. And it's gold. No more hassles.
If
automatically nesting. Sorry.
If I learn nothing new today, that's just saved me from stressing out and wondering.
It is a big, but it bothers most users at one point or another when they're especially when you're nesting a lot, right?
Yeah.
So
it's just one of those little things, little teething things that just sort of wind you up a little bit. But that's like you say, that's gold.
If it was turned off, if it was turned off by default, then it wouldn't hurt anybody. And if you wanted to try it, you could. But I actually feel I'd like to have control over what's rotated and what's not. So, that's nice. While we're in here as well, if you go to file format just quickly.
Yeah.
Earlier versions of VersaWorks don't have convert spot color turned on. So if they use this RCS library we were talking about earlier, it won't automatically replace them. So VersaWorks 5, for example, and before, you need to make sure that's turned on in your default properties for your queue. I think VersaWorks 5.2 or something like that, around that time, you could turn it on in the job. But prior to that, you had to have it on in the queue by default. So that needs to be turned on. And down the bottom, the matching method, Roland have done a great job here in the last few versions because they've got that automatically checked. And down in matching method, they've got that as absolute. Now, that matching method is terminology that really means rendering intent. Absolute is the absolute colorimetric. That is the important for spot colors, because that means that we're trying to hit the color regardless of the white point of the media. The others will have other sacrifices. So absolute is really important for your spot colors. So Roland, by default, now with all the new versions we install with new machines, automatically have those things checked. It's all perfect, which is really nice because it saves me having to do it every time.
Well, I used to.
With the older version, just check those things.
With that convert spot color, when I used to install them, when I used to work for a dealer install printers, we used to have to set that as default, like you say, every time on the VersaWorks on the VersaWorks 5. Just to touch on that convert spot colors, am I right in saying if the machine can't hit a certain color, it will convert it to get it as close as possible? Is that correct?
Yeah. So, well, that's when you talk about lab colors. Obviously, the colors you're talking about, the RCS library, they're device colors, so they're only whatever channels the machine has. So that library you've set up there now is a 4-color, so it's CMYK only. And when it converts it, it will always convert to those channels, the exact value. So if it's 80% cyan, it'll print 80% of the cyan ink. On that profile, mind you, a different profile will give you a different color in the RCS. That's important to note. But on different media, those RCS colors are device and media specific, and even resolution specific. So if you try to print the same colors at high speed or high quality, you will actually get a different density. So the colors will be different. If you have a Pantone color or something else that uses the lab values, which are device independent, it will then, like you say, try to target as close as it can using the absolute matching method. Gives us the closest possible hit. And when you do bring them in the lab colors, it'll actually show you a delta E value and a little symbol to tell you whether or not it's in spec or not. So if it thinks it's in the output profile, it can hit it. You won't have a little warning. It'll just say, yep, I can hit it. If it can't hit the color, it'll actually give you this delta E, which is a specific specification, letting us know how far out it would be.
Yeah, I've seen it on certain Pantone colors. That you can't, the old SP 540s or 300s, where they say can't quite hit a Pantone.
Orange 021.
Something like that, yeah. That's when I used to see it the most, and obviously the VG3s now have brought out the lights, the orange, the light.
Well, you talk about the light color. The lightings do not expand the gamut, and in reality, if the lightings are overused, we can't put as much ink down in total, which means then we get less gamut. So if the profile is not well built with light inks, it can actually give us a slightly smaller gamut. But for the most part, all these default ones from Roland are pretty darn good. And so it's not a major problem. But certainly the expectation that people say, oh, I've got a 7-color machine. They don't really have 7 colors. They've got 4 primaries and they've got 3 dilutes or lightings. And the lightings just fill in the they just fill in the dots in the lighter tones mostly, so that you get smoother prints, not so you get more color. So that's really important for people to understand.
Great stuff. Yeah, I think.
But yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to cover yourself, or
no? No, I think look, we don't want to get too far on other settings here because we were talking about the colors. So
yeah, it's like I say, for the user, I think everything we've covered so far has been, at least they can get a decent, they can understand the color management side of things, what they're selecting, what they're downloading, which is what I think as a good sort of base point. That's what we've seen today from yourself, mate. It's been absolutely, it's priceless, really. Even me learning certain things on this, I've always been told things until an expert like yourself sort of explains it a little bit. It's sort of still up in the air a little bit. So I appreciate everything you've explained and discussed. So yeah, if that's everything, mate, I really appreciate your time. I'm sure the users do as well. You put endless amount of time into helping others with advice, support on the Roland print support groups. If anyone has any questions of what you've seen so far today, or you want to expand on what you've seen today, feel free to get in touch with myself or Phil via the support groups, and I'm sure Phil wouldn't mind helping you out. Yeah, is there anything else from you, Phil? Anything you want to add, or anything from your service side you wanted to add, or if anyone's got any issues with profiles?
Yeah, look, so one of the things I've been able to work on in the last couple of years because of COVID, I haven't been able to travel as widely as I used to. So I've had to improve the ability to correct people's color without getting on site. That's pretty hard. But what I've worked out is, especially with VersaWorks, that I can just create some color correction ICCs for people who are using generic profiles. And we can do that very simply, which obviously keeps the cost down for people as well. So it's one of the things I've been working on, trying to fine tune that. And I'm fairly comfortable that I've sort of got that to a point now that I can do that. I actually do that for in Australia here when I'm on site. I'll actually print the correction swatches out, but I read them when I'm back at my office. And then I send the customer, or I log in remotely and plug in the profile. So if customers are feeling that, you know, $1,500 a profile, that's Australian, is too much, that's on site, that's getting there and getting it absolutely dialed in. Maybe they're getting a good result on a generic. There are options, and there's other people who do what I do. You know, seek out an expert. You know, they can probably build you something a little bit more basic, but it'll be a near enough result. Improve your grays, because if grays are wrong, the profile's wrong. So you know, there are options for people out there. There are, especially in the US, there's some great guys over there as well that I know. So, you know, just reach out and see. It may not be as scary as you think.
Yeah, that's fantastic, mate. Thanks for thanks for your time. Really appreciate your help. As you can see, my knowledge of colour is very basic, so you helped me out today. You know, it's really helped me. It's probably helped the users. So I really appreciate again your time in taking the time to do that. So yeah, thank you for everyone else for watching, taking the time to watch. If you've got any questions after this, get in contact with myself, or you want any more information on colour or any of Phil's services, get in touch. If he can't help, I'm sure he can push you in the direction of someone who can. So thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time. Have a great week.